we are praying and working for a great reformation. We've been praying for that in this community for many years. The elders on our multiple elder boards, routinely, one of the standing prayer requests in our meetings is, Lord, please give us reformation and revival, beginning with us, beginning with our hearts, beginning with our families, beginning with our churches. And I believe there's reason to think that God may be beginning to answer that prayer, but we don't yet see it full blown, full bloom. What we have right now is a reprieve. What we have right now is a moment to breathe, a moment to work. And so this is a moment in which we ought to be thinking to ourselves and talking in our families and amongst ourselves, how do we take advantage of this great gift? How do we turn a profit on this grace? This is a war we're in. We're in a holy war. And this text in 2 Corinthians 10 says that our holy war is not primarily or fundamentally fleshly or carnal. Our weapons are not fleshly or carnal, but they are mighty for pulling down strongholds. They are mighty for pulling down strongholds. So when the text here says that our weapons are not carnal, he's not saying, and so they're not really doing anything. No, that's not what he says at all. He says, they're not carnal. We're not talking about bombs and missiles. We're not talking about chariots and spears and swords, but we're talking about something far more powerful. They are mighty for pulling down strongholds, casting down imaginations, and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ, having in readiness to revenge all disobedience when your obedience is fulfilled. So this doesn't mean that there's no place for biblical and godly political action. That's not what it means. But it means that obedience to Christ is where the action is. Obedience to Christ is where the action is. One thing that political action, if of all you think about is political action, you're thinking about a very tiny element, a very tiny aspect of the battlefield. But if you think about obedience, then you're talking about the whole battlefield, which includes some measure of political action. Right? But if you focus on the one, you lose most of the battlefield. But if you focus on obedience to Christ, you get the whole battlefield. Where does Christ want to be obeyed? Everywhere. Right? Where are their imaginations lifted up against Christ? Everywhere. Right? Where are their thoughts that need to be taken captive to obey Jesus? Well, everywhere. If we think about it in terms of obedience, then we're talking about the financial sector, we're talking about foreign affairs, we're talking about the public square, we're talking about education, we're talking about families, we're talking about business, we're talking about the arts, we're talking about entertainment. We want all of those thoughts taken captive to obey Jesus Christ. So it doesn't mean no political action, but it means that obedience to Christ must drive everything we do. And we want to value our weapons the way that God does. So God tells us, here's the most potent thing. Here's the bazooka. Here's the tank, right? Here's the missiles. And frequently Christians say, but everyone else is really mesmerized with this really cool-looking stick. Look at them all. There's the CNN anchor. Look at it. Look at the stick. But it's a stick. Now, does it have a role to play? Yes. Does it have a place yeah, it has a place. But God says, look, these are your mighty weapons. Obedience to Christ. These are your mighty weapons. Worship. This is your mighty weapon. Your family, your marriage, your kids, they're arrows in your hands. These are your mighty weapons. Yes, and make sure that your civil authorities obey me. Yes, work for that. You want every thought captive. Absolutely. But don't get it backwards and upside down. Value weapons the way God does.